So I will read from Death in the East, which is Le Soleil Rouge de la Sam, mais en anglais, and we'll start at the beginning. Prologue, February 1922, Jatinga, Assam. The birds were killing themselves, not a few, but thousands. They're starlings, said the woman, suicide birds. A long-dead schoolmaster's question echoed inside my skull. You, Wyndham, the collective noun for a flock of starlings is? My ignorance met by the crack of ruler upon desk. Murmuration, boy. A flock of starlings is called a murmuration. Now don't forget, murmuration. It suggested the clandestine, something whispered, something hidden. Maybe it had to do with the way they flew, vast flocks pirouetting through the clouds as though of one mind, receiving instructions from one voice. And tonight, in the void of a new moon, did that voice tell them to plummet earthward through mountain mists and to break themselves on the floor of this valley in the middle of nowhere? I leaned on the veranda's wooden balustrade and watched. In the valley below, the flames from 100 torches illuminated the scene from Dante as half-naked tribesmen shrieked and ran and set about the fallen creatures with clubs and sticks. Why do they do it? I asked. The woman turned to me, her expression suddenly somber. Fear, she said. The same reason men the world over attack anything they don't understand. I meant the birds. Why do they come here to die? She smiled. Everyone has to die somewhere. And personally, Captain, I can't think of a better place. Can you? She looked down at the tribesmen. Of course, the locals say the valley is cursed, that the birds become possessed by evil spirits. And you, I asked, what do you believe? Me? She feigned surprise, a pretense for my benefit, then moved closer. When she spoke, her voice was a whisper. If you decide to stay in our little outpost for any length of time, Captain, you may find a fair few of our number who are possessed of a certain malevolence. Who's to say there isn't evil at work here? The cries from the valley floor started to ebb and the air began to still, no longer roiled by the constant swoop and smack of birds crashing to their deaths. Behind us, a door opened. Yellow light spilled onto the velvet blackness of the veranda. A starched servant in white tunic and stiff-fanned turban made the call to dinner, then stood aside as the sahibs and the mem sahibs of the Jatinga Club downed drinks and processed inside. Emily Carter took a final sip from her flute. Brace yourself, Captain. This is where the fun starts. She handed the empty glass to the servant and disappeared inside, though not before kicking a blood-stained bird off the balcony and away into the darkness below. Chapter 1, 2 weeks earlier. I had left Calcutta with a grim resolve, a suitcase full of Kerdugurd, and, in case of emergencies, a bullet-sized ball of opium resin hidden between the folds of my clothes. My destination was an ashram in the Kachar Hills, a forgotten backwater in a far-flung corner of the distant province of Assam, 3 days' travel and 1,000,000 miles from the sophistication, such as it was, of Calcutta. It had come, if not highly recommended, then at least loudly lauded by my physician, Dr. Chatterjee, a quack who specialized in Ayurvedic potions and whom I'd have dismissed as a charlatan had it not been for the fact that his remedies seemed to work. In hallowed tones, he'd explained that the place was run by a holy man called Devraha Swami, a 250-year-old sage who could cure most anything from acid reflux to yellow fever with nothing more than a few herbs and a lot of prayer. It wasn't much to pin one's hopes on, but in my present condition I had little option. And as they say, a drowning man will clutch at a straw or a herb. The Kerdugurd had been Chatterjee's suggestion too. Smashed, mashed, and mixed in with a few other elements, it formed a pulp that, when imbibed, tasted like boot polish, but offered temporary respite from the opium pangs. I packed enough to last me the 3-day journey, with some to spare, because when it came to rail transport, or anything else for that matter in India, nothing ever ran to schedule. I'd arrived in the country almost 4 years earlier, sauntered off the boat at Kidarpur docks and straight into the first of 1,000 opium dens. If that's an exaggeration, it's only slight, and I'd certainly found my first fix within a week of arrival. I had not come here as an addict, an opium fiend, as the priests and the pedants called it. My use had been purely medicinal, a means of staunching nightmares and stimulating sleep. Addiction had come later, gradually, perniciously, and my realization of the fact more slowly still. I tried to wean myself off it. Who wouldn't? After all, a policeman with an opium habit is like a long-distance runner with his laces tied together. You might manage to stay on your feet for a while, but sooner or later, you're going to end up falling on your face. And people notice when you fall. Unfortunately for me, the people who'd noticed first had been the all-seeing men and women of Section H, the intelligence arm of the military, responsible for the political stability of the Raj. They tended to interpret their brief in the widest possible terms, which meant they spied on anyone and everyone, and that included me and my nocturnal pilgrimages to the wrong sort of temples. For now, they'd kept the information to themselves, less as a kindness and more as leverage to force me to dance to their tune. Either way, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't change their minds and report it to my superiors, and the threat was there like a knife to my throat. Never being overly keen on blades, I decided to do something about it. Hence my sojourn, first by rail and then by road to the ashram of Devraha Swami. The journey had started smoothly enough. I caught the Darjeeling mail from Shialda station to Sandahar Junction in the north of Bengal, hoping to make the connection to Guwahati, the capital of Assam. But the connection failed to turn up, due apparently to a flash strike by the no-good, bloody awful native railway workers further up the line. Faced with such adversity, I did what any self-respecting Englishman would do. I paid a railway boy a few annas to direct me to the nearest alcoholic drink and climbed inside. I spent the best part of a day cooling my heels and propping up the bar in a fly-blown joint called Duncan's Hotel, where the beer was wet, but the company sadly lacking. It's no fun drinking alone. Not much, anyway. And when it came to comrades in ale, or comrades of any sort for that matter, I really only had one. My friend and junior officer, Sergeant Surendranath Banerjee. He saved my life once, but I didn't hold that against him. Of course, Surendranath wasn't his real name. Indians didn't go in for stiff upper lip Victorian nomenclature, not when it came to naming their children, at least. His real name was Surendranath, which was difficult to pronounce, so everyone called him Surendranath. Everyone British, at least. Surendranath, however, was on his way to Dhaka in Bengal's second city, situated in the arse end of the province and separated from Calcutta by 200 miles and half of the Ganges Delta. He was off to his aunt's house to seek refuge from the torrid independence fever that had infected Calcutta's native populace and divided families down the middle, setting brother against brother, father against son. Half a day in, and I was already missing him. Mainly, I realized, because over the last 6 months, we'd spent hardly any time sitting and having a drink like we used to in the days when I'd first arrived, when Calcutta was new and shining, and the opium was my friend and not my master. I sat in the bar in Duncan's Hotel and raised a glass to him in tribute, which was ironic given his tolerance for alcohol was on a par with the average English schoolgirl. At dusk, the urchin returned with the news of the arrival of the Assam mail, and I followed him out the door, still none the wiser as to who Duncan was, or had been, or what terrible madness had possessed him to put his hotel up here in the middle of nowhere.